might be a little bit smarter than I am, big and stronger too, maybe, but none of them will ever love you the way I do. You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. Isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. We stick together, see it through, 'cause you got a friend in me. You got a friend in me.
Okay, we only have one vocab word today, and it's 30, 60, 90 triangle. So we've already talked about 45, 45, 90 triangle. That's the other special right triangle. Now let's talk about 30, 60, 90. So it's a right triangle that has one 30-degree angle here and one 60-degree angle here. And just like the 45, 45, 90 triangle, we can be given just one side and we can figure out the missing sides. So we won't even need the Pythagorean theorem. So just like the other special right triangle, we have a template for this. And we've already looked at this in class. Remember, the shortest side we would just call n. And do you remember what the hypotenuse would be? Well, the hypotenuse is 2 times the smallest side. Okay. The third side is the little more complicated side. It's n times the square root of 3. Now, one way to remember where the n square root of 3 is it's on the same side as the 30 degrees. So 3 and 3. Okay, so smallest side we would call n. Hypotenuse is twice that size, so we call that 2n. And then the side with the 30 degrees is n root 3. So having this template will help us find missing sides of our right triangle. So let's give it a try. Okay, first problem. We have to solve for x. So let's put a spot for our answer over here. Okay, so x equals, okay. Do you remember what we did with the 45, 45, 90 triangle? Do you remember that we wrote our template first and that helped us solve for x? So let's do that. So our smallest side, it's the one across from the 30 degree, is our n. The hypotenuse is 2n. And the side next to the 30 degrees is n root 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and write the equation that we have to solve over off to the side. We're trying to find x. So x equals whatever n is times the square root of 3. So let's take a look at what we have. All we need in order to get x, to get our answer, we need to know what n is. So let's look over here. Do we know what n is? Yes, n is 10. So we have what n equals. N equals 10. So I can just go ahead and fill that in. So x is going to equal 10 root 3. So 10 times the square root of 3. That's it. Let's try another one. Okay, for problem 2, we have to find both x and y. So we're only given one side. We have to figure out what is the value of x and what is the value of y. What are those lengths? Well, if we didn't have a template and we were trying to do Pythagorean theorem, it wouldn't work because we have 2 unknown values. Can't do it. So why don't we go ahead and put a spot for our answer over here. X equals, y equals. Okay, let's fill in our template. So the smallest side, we know that that is n. The hypotenuse is 2 times n. And the side next to the 30 degree is n root 3. Okay, so let's write down the equations that we have to solve. We need to solve for y, so we have n equals y. And we need to solve for x, and we know that x equals n root 3. Okay, so I wrote this one first because it's easier. So we need to know what n is. If we can figure out n, then we'll have y. And then also if we can figure out n, then we'll have x, because we'll just put whatever n is right here. So let's look at what we do have. We know that 12 equals 2 times n. So can we solve that off to the side and figure out what n equals? So I'm going to take this and solve for n. So 12 equals 2n. Divide by 2. And we get that n equals 6. So now that we know what n is, we can just go in and plug it in. So here's n. We know that that's 6. So y is 6. And we kind of could figure that out easily too, because we know that the smallest side is half as big as the hypotenuse. So if the hypotenuse is 12, the smallest side would have to be 6. Okay, so back over here to x. So for x, all we need to know is what is n again. So we just put a 6 right here. So we know that x is going to equal 6 times the square root of 3. So 6 times the square root of 3. So we were able to solve a right triangle without the Pythagorean theorem. Pretty cool. Let's try one more. Okay, this time we're just solving for x. So we have to find the shortest side of our right triangle. So let's put a spot for our answer. X equals. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill in our template like we always do. So the smallest side is n. The hypotenuse is 2n. We don't really need that because we're not dealing with that side. And then this side is n root 3. Okay, well, our equation that we need to write off to the side is n equals x, or x equals n. Okay, so basically we need to figure out what is n. So if we look here, we can't really do anything with this. Okay, but if we look here, we know that 15 is equal to n times square root of 3. So this is our equation we're going to have to solve. We're going to have to figure out what is n from that. So I'm going to write 15 equals n root 3. And we need to solve that. So when we solve an equation like this, we need to get n by itself. So we divide both sides by the square root of 3. Okay, so I get that n equals 15 over the square root of 3. Well, we haven't talked about this yet. We're going to talk about this more in class, but we're not allowed to have a square root in the denominator. It's just not simplified. Okay, so we can't leave a square root like this. So here's how you get rid of the square root of 3 in the denominator. It's called rationalizing the denominator. Okay, and we're going to talk about it more in class, but I'll just show you a little preview of how it works. So what you do is you take your denominator, square root of 3, and you multiply both sides of your, or both numerator and denominator, you multiply both of them by that number, So you multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. Do you know what we're really multiplying by? Well, square root of 3 over square root of 3 is really just the number 1 if you were to actually divide it. So we're multiplying by something that doesn't really change the value. It's just going to make it look different. So what happens is we end up with 15 times the square root of 3 over, well, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9. Well, what is the square root of 9? It's 3. And up here we have 15 times the square root of 3. Well, there's one more thing we can do with this. We can reduce the 15 and the 3. Okay, so if we divide 15 and 3, or divide both of them by 3, we're going to end up getting 5 root 3. And that's what n equals. So I know it's a little confusing. It's the first time you've probably seen that before. We're going to talk about it more in class. So don't stress. Just make sure you write it all down. So that is what n equals. So I'm going to take that and plug it in here for n. So 5 root 3 is what n equals. So I can go ahead and say that that is what x equals also. So x equals 5 times the square root of 3. All right. Okay, have yourself a great day.